Hey everyone, we're really excited about this episode. We were able to land Matt Haller, who's the president and CEO of the International Franchise Association. That is the trade association for the entire franchising industry. More importantly, the topic of the discussion is the fact that the backbone of the entire franchising industry is locally owned and operated small businesses. As we've heard so much over the last couple of years, buy local, right? Well, that is franchising, and he's going to explain exactly what that means. The teaser is just in the Heartland area alone, if you combine Nebraska and Iowa, did you know that 158,000 jobs are attributed to franchising and $13 billion, that's billion with a B, in economic output, are attributed to franchising, all locally owned and operated. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heartland Franchise Guide, your insider's guide to all things franchising in the local area. I'm Blake Martin, local small business franchise owner, and your Heartland Franchise Guide. This is the place for advocacy, resources, and education on all things franchising in the local area, and it's a great place for entrepreneurs to stop by just to learn more about the franchise industry itself. Today, we're going to burst the bubble on a misconception that you hear at times about the franchising industry. You see, franchising is and always has been all about locally owned and operated small businesses. I have the privilege and honor today of introducing somebody who has a national perspective on this that simply very few can possibly have. And with that, I would like to give a warm welcome to our guest today, Mr. Matt Haller, President and CEO of the International Franchise Association. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt.
Hey, Blake. Good morning. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. So I mentioned that you have a unique perspective because of your role. Could we start by you telling us a little bit about what is the International Franchise Association and what's your role as the leader of the organization?
Sure. So the IFA is a trade association based in Washington, D.C. We have 1,100 member franchisor brands, about 600 member supplier brands, and over 100,000 individual franchise business owners who are members of the IFA. Our mission is to protect, to enhance, and to promote franchising on a global scale. And we do that, those are three buckets. Protect, that's advocacy, government relations, lobbying Congress or state legislatures. Enhance, that's really the work we do to educate and convene within the industry around franchising business practices, around different disciplines, whether it's franchise development or marketing or legal, technology, other areas, convening at our events and with online education. And then promote franchising, that's our work to the general public. We promote franchising through various research that we produce or partner with organizations to produce. And then we promote franchising to different affinity or demographic groups through different program areas, things like veterans and diversity and the like. So that's IFA, who we are and what we do in a nutshell. And look forward to talking more about some of the issues and challenges and opportunities that we work on behalf of our members and even people who aren't members but are in franchising.
Wow, you guys cover a lot of ground.
There's certainly a lot of activity at the association, but it's reflective of all the activity and the great activity in franchising. I mean, it's a dynamic, diverse, thriving sector of the economy, and as you said in your intro, an area that's oftentimes misunderstood for what franchising really is in terms of what the brand does versus what the local owner's responsibilities are. And that's something that we're constantly dealing with, particularly in the public policy advocacy realm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, let's get right into the heart of the discussion that franchising is all about locally owned and operated small businesses. But you brought up a good point. Even in the public policy forum, it's really important to be able to provide clarity on that topic. Can you maybe start that conversation by talking about Where is the misconception? Where is the misconception about franchising not being locally owned and operated?
Yeah, so I think your average consumer, when they walk into a McDonald's or a Dunkin' Donuts or any even emerging concept that it sort of has a brand, they don't always think of that as a locally owned and operated entity. In a lot of ways, they take kind of franchising for granted, not in a malicious way, just in a way that they're going to a lot of our members' businesses, because of convenience, because of quality, but they're not always fully appreciating, that they are indeed locally owned and operated. And in many ways, the development and the evolution of the franchise business model, has perpetuated this. Like, we've perfected this uniformity and standardization of brands in local communities. But by virtue of that, not every brand is, making local ownership a part of the communication that they're doing with consumers in local communities. So when we do public opinion research, it's not fully known or appreciated that these are, local businesses, which is why we constantly are in an education battle on the proactive side with the public and with policymakers to make that clear, and putting franchisees really at the center of how we're communicating about the business model, particularly to our elected leaders. At the same time, you have this sort of public, misperception or not full appreciation of franchising being local. You have outside forces who, are sometimes seeking to change the business model through policy that they'd like to enact to make the franchise model more of an integrated, one business versus, truly separate. And that's something that organized labor, has really been trying to enact, for their own agenda, and something that the IFA has really spent a lot of time advocating against, because, again, the franchise model is built on, this sort of separation and the power that comes with that separation of where the franchisee's responsibilities are and where the brand's responsibilities are, and that's a lot of what we do to preserve. So that work isn't happening in a vacuum. There are powerful forces that would like to see franchising exist in a different way than it does, and we need to constantly be advocating both in Congress as well as in states and cities here in the U.S. And some of these same issues are actually happening internationally as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up too, Matt, because as I always say in my intro, I own my own small business franchise here in Omaha, Nebraska, and I've seen over the years, of course, I joined this franchise system because I wanted to have my own business that I owned and operated, a separate business entity from my franchise organization. But I knew my chances of success were statistically increased dramatically if I hitched my wagon to a franchise organization. And I want to know that outside forces that have nothing to do with my local community, my local employees, the volunteer work that I do locally, I want to know that none of those outside forces have control over who is and isn't the employer of my employees, and if I can compete in the same way as other locally owned and operated small businesses. So, frankly, I'm very glad to hear that you're focusing time and energy on advocating for that. Thank you.
It's probably what we spend the most amount of our time and resources dealing with in terms of maintaining that separation of control, particularly around labor and employment matters. For most small businesses, it's the area of greatest flexibility in your margins, and we just strongly believe that franchisees know their communities much better in terms of who to employ, what to offer them in terms of pay and benefits and opportunities for advancement than some faraway corporation is going to know. And there are a lot of great integrated, vertically integrated brands, whether they're in sectors that are franchised or otherwise. But franchising has this unique power to give local people the ability to own and operate a business, but also, identify local talent, build partnerships with local organizations, whether it's charitable or otherwise. And that is something that, increasingly has, come under scrutiny in public policy. And we are just constantly trying to mobilize more of our members, whether they're brands or franchisees or suppliers to the industry, to help us, again, go back to my mission, protect, enhance, and promote the franchise business model.
Clearly, this is something that you focus a lot of your time on. I can only imagine how intense the last couple of years must have been, being a representative of small business owners all over the country, all over the world. Have you seen more, less, or the same kind of focus on this topic of locally owned and operated franchises over these last couple of years?
Yeah, the pandemic was really a moment in time where the country, came together to solve problems in a crisis, and the franchise community came together and made clear, particularly as it relates to COVID relief and small business relief, that franchisees, truly are small businesses locally owned and operated, and that is really the reason why programs like the Paycheck Protection Program, recognized that fact in a major, bipartisan way in Congress, and another COVID relief at the state and local level that cities and states were providing for businesses who needed support. And so, franchisees were recognized as the local small businesses that they are, and that's great. As we've sort of come mostly out of COVID, we've had a major change in the political environment coming out of the 2020 elections, of course, and some of those issues around labor and employment are now back front and center. They went a bit dormant during the last administration, which was more focused on eliminating costly regulations, and so we're fighting some of those issues again that had gone dormant around 2016. But they've been present at the state and local level, and that's where more often than not, things can advance more quickly. So we do spend an inordinate amount of time and resources in places like California and New York, and some of the more progressive states that seem to be on more the front lines of advancing things that are perceived as and positioned as pro-worker or pro-labor, but in our view are really a means to a political end, and the franchise model is sometimes caught in the middle. And I think that is really just a reflection of, we have a lot of growth and a lot of potential, and organized labor sees that as a way to grow their influence and the amount of individuals that they seek to represent in what's largely a service sector economy now. And that is mostly what the franchise model is service related businesses.
Boy, I am glad we're recording that, because that is just a fantastic snippet for the kind of value a trade association can bring, just an understanding of the mechanics behind some of the changes that you see in a regulatory environment. So thanks for that. And that helps me remember to ask you, if somebody wants to learn more about the International Franchise Association, the features and benefits of being a member of it, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so franchise.org is the best place to go for all of the work and overview, to join as a member, to learn about our events and networking opportunities. If you're particularly interested in advocacy issues, we have a program called the Franchise Action Network, which is a grassroots network where we activate franchisees and others interested in franchising issues. When something happens in a city or a state or in Congress where we need to communicate with a particular member, and that's franchiseactionnetwork.com. You can also text the word FAN, F-A-N, to 52886, and you'll get an immediate text back with an opportunity to become a Franchise Action Network member, and it will immediately ask you for your zip code and contact information so we can population map you to your members of Congress and your state elected officials.
Well, that's convenient.
It is cool.
Who are the members of the International Franchise Association?
Yeah, so I mentioned we have about 1,100 brands who are members. So those are, everybody from the largest, publicly traded companies that everybody's heard of: McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Marriott, Hilton Hotels, but all the way down to small or early stage franchise concepts that are just getting started and want to learn how to become the next big thing. And so the makeup of the IFA membership is pretty reflective of the franchising economy. About 40% of our membership is in the restaurant industry. Another 10% are in hospitality, hotel ownership. And then we have a lot in personal services. Those could be everything from fitness studios to different types of salons or other kind of non-food retail businesses. We have a lot of business-to-business service franchise brands. That's another 8 to 10% or so of the economy. So think of a sign-making franchise or a UPS store franchise or companies like that. And then we have commercial and residential services. That's a booming category and an easier area of entry in terms of cost in most cases. So whether it's commercial clean and residential cleaning or landscaping, dog walking services. The real estate sector is another category that is franchised, and I feel like I'm missing one off the top of my head, Blake. But this space well. Maybe you can remind the viewers if there's another category that is heavily concentrated in franchising that I'm not thinking of right off the top of my head here.
Well, I'm not going to add anything because you are clearly like a walking encyclopedia of franchising. I won't even go there. But I think you did a fantastic job of summarizing all the categories, not surprisingly.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'll just mention, so I talked about all the franchisees within those categories, but our supplier membership, brokers are a big category. Some like FranNet, of course, which you're involved in, are both franchisors as well as suppliers. But then, really anybody providing a product or a service to franchising, whether it's legal advice or marketing and technology support, franchise sales, support, the development of franchise documents and things like that. We have about 600 brands that are providing products and services into franchising who are members of the IFA and do great work and really help us get smart at the association, help particularly those early stage franchisors get smart, or franchisees learn about how to go through due diligence and evaluate what brand might be best for them and things of that nature.
Well, you just tied that up very nicely for me. I appreciate that. You must have had some formal media training, Matt.
I've been through the ringer a time or two, but when you live and breathe this stuff every day, you just become a evangelist for what we do here. And it's like I said earlier, it's a dynamic industry to be able to represent. My job is easy because our members, really do have great stories, and they're the American dream, right? And you literally have people working at these brands that are, there to set people up for success that they want to have come into their system. And when it works, it's a pretty magical thing. Of course, it doesn't always work. It's not without issues in franchising. We don't want to be too Pollyannish about it. Both sides of the franchise relationship have responsibilities. And, when people get into that with, clear eyes and a clear understanding of where their obligations are and then follow those obligations, it really works quite well.
I think that's a very fair assessment of it. So thank you very much. And Matt, I have about 500 more questions I want to ask you, but I promised that I would respect your time. I know you're literally on your way to Capitol Hill after this. So I want to say one more time, thank you so much, Matt Haller, for joining us today, President and CEO of the International Franchise Association, which is the leading trade association for the franchising industry. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on why franchising is locally owned and operated small business.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Blake. It's an honor to represent franchising, and we have a great team at the IFA of about 35 that work on the professional staff and a lot of great volunteer leaders who are in the organization. And if you're in franchising, don't hesitate to reach out to the IFA. I gave our website earlier, but I'll give it again here. It's franchise.org. And IFA is like a lot of things in life. You get out of it what you put into it. And, people that, come to us and say, hey, I want to help, we're here to steer you in the right direction. Or if you come to us saying, we're a member and we're looking for something that we may not know how to do, that's, we're here to connect you to somebody in franchising that's probably been through that same challenge. And there really is such a great sense of community in the franchise sector, and people that are willing to share and learn from others.
Thank you so much, Matt. Ending it right there on sharing and learning from each other. So one more time, thank you to Matt Haller for joining us. He's the President and CEO of the International Franchise Association. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this episode of the Heartland Franchise Guide. Don't keep us a secret. Subscribe, follow, and share on your favorite podcasting platform this episode and others. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon on another episode of the Heartland Franchise Guide.